but it's okay.
All right.
All right. Hey, Jeff, thanks so much for being here today. Would you mind telling everyone watching who you are, a little bit of your background, your story?
Sure. Hey, John, thanks so much. It's an honor to be here on behalf of our longtime great friend, Demetrius DuBose, and this project that you've undertaken through the love of a friend and the compassion you have for the injustice is just so compelling. And so it's an honor to be able to try and illuminate, our meeting, our friendship and other thing. But yes, I'm Jeff Baldwin, and I grew up in Southern California. I grew up surfing most all my life, or doing all action sports, traveled the world for a long time, surfing in surf events all over. And, this beach area in Del Mar and North County, California, Southern California specifically, it's just beach culture, beach life. And I met Demetrius on the beach when he had first arrived in Southern California. He'd been coming a few times before through his good friend and roommate, John Lynch, who also, grew up in this area, went to high school where I went, but just years younger than me. And so he obviously fell in love with this area and decided, well, this is where I feel at home. And that love that he had for this area and the group of friends that we all had, or I had, and then he was introduced to through John, and this beach life of volleyball and surfing and all these things, that's where we just kind of began our relationship. And I don't remember where we met. It might've just been on the beach or at a barbecue, or, I had through friends at a volleyball tournament or something, but I just remember distinctly our energies. And everybody knows, if you didn't get to know Demetrius, he was just a star rising, this bright light of cosmic, not in a negative way, but just sonic energy, magnetic pull just coming. And I was sort of energetic in that way, and we just met and hit it off. And the next thing I remember, or in this weird sequence, he said, I want to learn how to skateboard. I'm like, are you sure? That was like one of this random, just Demetrius just says things. It just always was right up, coming out of his heart. If he thought it, he said it with a big giant smile. And so I said, okay, sure, I'll be at your house tomorrow morning. And we're not talking, aggressive skateboarding in a half pipe or anything. We're just talking longboards. But to him, it was absolutely foreign. Something maybe he did as a kid once or twice, or I don't know, but that was the beginning. And then it was like skate lessons at Demo's place every day. And then it was, I want to learn how to surf. I can do this. I'm an athlete. I'm a great athlete. And he never would say never. He's like, I'm going for it. No matter what, nobody's going to tell me. I'll take my licks. And it just expanded from there. And the next thing, over years, we were just hanging out all the time.
Yeah.
And so natural and so good. And
what can you tell me what years are like? It can be around this time, whatever, but what are you, when was
this? I mean, geez, it must have been in the mid 90s or 93, or I'm not quite sure of that sequence, but for those 6 years leading up to his tragic death,
yes,
this bond just happened. And from skateboarding to surfing to teaching him how to snowboard, to snowboard trips and surfing all around, and him getting so involved in volleyball, which I wasn't a super volleyball player, but this area has ex-Olympians and collegiate champions, and so he was just inundated in this world of incredible top class volleyball, beach, and they played indoor too, but on the beach. And he just wanted to be a part of it. And he's like, I'm going to do this. I can do this. Nobody's going to stop me. And no one did. And he just continued.
For a skateboarder, how did he do?
Oh, great. He wobbled around for a while, but he just, and you know this through knowing, and all the athletes that talk about him, and obviously top of Notre Dame, one of the top draft picks, and his era. I mean, he was a master of technique, watching, learning, absorbing, listening, recreating that moment when someone told them something. He would just pick it up and he would just sit and stare, and then he'd push wrong. Let's say, this is just so silly, but in skateboarding, he'd push the wrong foot, or his feet would be in the wrong place, and he'd jump off immediately and criticize himself and be like, oh, you told me something different, I did it wrong, okay. And he'd just do it and do it, and then I'd leave and he'd keep doing it, I think, I don't know, but and the whole thing that was so amazing is, obviously he's in his NFL career with Tampa Bay at the time, and so he's training. I'd get up early to go surf, and I'd see him running miles from his beach house up to a high school, Torrey Pines, where actually John Lynch went to school, and he'd train on all this, whatever training facility they had there, not a gym, but we're talking logs and timber and pull-up bars and really rudimentary stuff. But he'd run his 7 miles one way, do that, and then go play on the beach all day. And then he had his nap regime and his diet, and he was just living this Cali dream. And he I don't know if you remember, but for anyone watching, he had this bright yellow early Range Rover, the convertible kind with the snap-on top. This top was never snapped on. Winter, summer, fall, it didn't matter. Rain, sleet, blazing heat, loud, and he'd always just have the music cranked, and he loved all music too. That was another thing. He didn't ever just say, oh, I only want this. He was listening to everything all the time, and it was so brilliant to be around him. And I don't know if you shared the photo of him and I, but that was at a volleyball tournament in Baja California at Estero Beach in Ensenada, which was a big, raging, fun thing to do. But boy, we had a really good run. And what's so compelling too, John, is that somehow when our stars hit and aligned in our friendship, I didn't realize it at the time, but later, or as it was going on and things kind of were changing a little bit for Demetrius, everyone would call me, I'm talking NFL players, the people I thought that were his absolute peers were like, Jeff, where's Demo? What's going on? What's happening? And I was like, wow, I don't know. And even at one point, I lived in a small studio up in the old hills of Del Mar. I mean, I'm talking like a 20 by 20, 1 bedroom with a kitchenette and a bathroom studio. And this is when Demetrius had signed with the Jets, and he had an oblique injury that he was working through. And then unfortunately he got cut. And I just got a call from him. Hey, Jeff,
so this is 1997. This is 1997. July 97, he gets cut from the Jets.
Thank you. Yeah, so I get this call from a Demetrius. Hey, Jeff, I'm packing up. I'm leaving New York. I got cut. And I'm devastated. I'm like, what? Okay, sure, Demetrius, you can stay here. And his house that he owned at the time was leased out. Obviously, he wasn't expecting that would happen in New York, so he couldn't go there. So there I am in my 20 by 20 studio, and Demetrius shows up with his 4 gigantic military duffel bags of stuff. And I had a bed that was built up in the studio, a few feet, because it was an economy of space. And he lived under that bed for 3 weeks straight. It was just such a crazy time. And I was trying to absorb his pain for a few days. He didn't leave, understandably. He was just really coming to grips with what was going on. And he was heartbroken, and his ego and his pride. And anyway.
What happened? Well, Jeff, what happened? What did he say happened with the Jets? Why was he suddenly released? I mean, it's so odd. He signs really to be a starter there, and then he's released before training camp even starts. So what was his explanation of what happened?
In how he sort of explained it to me, and I'm not a knowledgeable person on it. I mean, the funny thing between our relationship, I didn't even follow football much my life at all. So I think he enjoyed that, because I wasn't someone, but
yeah,
he had, before he had left the Jets, he had sort of adapted a different type of training regime than what was considered the norm in that era or a decade and a half ago. It's changed a lot, you know. I mean, back then people didn't do yoga, whatever. So he's like, I'm going to do yoga. I'm going to train it at an Agoscu center, which was an alternative type of training, different than what you'd classify just the heavy bulk reps and the, you know, the type of conditioning that you've heard about in camps of football forever, which still goes on. But I think a lot of the athletes have adapted to a different blend of diet, training, and all that. And that, so what he sort of said was he and Parcells just did not jive on that level. He's like, no, I'm going to train and eat the way I want, not the way you're telling me, because that way is antiquated. And obviously he's the coach. So that was sort of how he delivered it to me, which I understood. I'm like, okay, I get it, but wow, what now?
Yeah.
And that what now is really the cusp of this entire story, because the what now led to, and again, I was thinking about this through the evening before. I never knew his agent. He never talked about his agent, who that was, how that worked. And I would ask him occasionally, I'm like, are you looking at other teams? And he would sort of just not answer it. He was really internalizing where he wanted to go in life. And at the same time, I felt he was so enamored and having such a beautiful time for the first time in so long in his life. Like, I get to wake up and go play volleyball all day and swim in the ocean and do what I want. Wow. So I don't know if at that moment he was even hungry to continue as an NFL player, but he kept his conditioning up, obviously. I mean, freak of nature, specimen. And he did all the work. I just don't know if that somehow that was a final, something in his heart that just, again, I don't know.
I mean, Jackie, his mom, said right after he was slaughtered on Mission Boulevard, she said, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10, Demetrius compartmentalized that release, and it was a 10 for him, the pain that he felt from that.
Yeah.
And, you know, you saw it firsthand. You've told me stories where he really wouldn't leave that bedroom for days because he was so depressed, so hurt from losing that, his identity, right? It was wrapped up in being a football player, being an elite football player. And I think you probably can relate when you had to, like, you know, not professionally surf anymore. There's a feeling when you have to give up the thing that you've been doing. And he probably didn't even have to give it up. I'm sure there were people calling.
Right. And that's that unknown that I never got an answer. I'm like, there must be, but I'm not going to pressure. And I'm just going to encourage you to keep up your regime, because that phone call could come any minute of any day. And the season hasn't begun, or even if there's 5 games into the season. But he internalized that heavily. And then he really wanted to play volleyball. And then that's where he put a lot of his energy.
How was he as a volleyball? Talk about his him on the beach as a volleyball player.
I mean, you know, he was an incredible athlete, but there's a difference between being an incredible athlete in a different atmosphere and then trying to just take those skills, because the timing's different, the footwork's different, and he had all those things, but then it's applying it in a 3D game time sense, which that takes the lifetime to learn. So he's competing with literally, you know, Steve Timmons, Olympic gold medalists, and all these other Kouris and all these guys that were the premier. And he'd get so frustrated. I can do this, but they were coached their whole lives in that sport. So he was a volleyball player, but to be at that level, that's a whole other world.
Right.
Understandably. But in his mind, he's like, I can do it too.
And he kept at it. It's not like, you know, I mean, he kept at it until the day of his death. I mean, the day of his death, Matt Olson said it. Other people have said it. Randy said it. You know, he played the best volleyball of his life. And he had adapted to the sport. He had shed some bulk, right? And started understanding the nuances of the sport. And so he was, according to Matt Olson, who is an Olympic caliber volleyball player, is like he was on his way. He definitely could have gone pro. He was learning it. And he was also really intelligent about picking volleyball because people, you know, when your prime is in volleyball for men, early 30s.
Yeah.
So it just was one of those things that, and I think you saw it probably when you saw him on a surfboard, on a skateboard, on a snowboard, on skis, his willingness to just jump into the fire, just go right at it, bravery, and like, even though he was frustrated, not being so frustrated that he was going to quit, he was graceful, even when he was getting his ass kicked on the volleyball court.
Right. And that's the interesting part. So you asked me about, you know, my perception of his volleyball. Well, that was leading up till before he sort of left Del Mar for a while and was living down in Mission Beach. So he, you know, really dedicated himself. And that there was this time where that's when we sort of lost touch, which was when I was getting calls from a John Lynch or other friends.
And what were they saying? What were these calls? Can you provide the details of what they were saying?
They were worried. Hey, Jeff, you're the closest to him. Have you heard from him or seen him? And at that point, I was heartbroken too, because I hadn't. And, you know, I mean, it was the early era. I think I had a Razor snap phone, or who knows what I had. But, you know, people would reach out, and there would just be no response. And no, I didn't have an address. I didn't have anything. And so I didn't get to see him during a lot of that time.
Yeah. So you don't really know, but you heard things. You heard things, I'm sure, right?
Yeah. I mean, I heard he was, you know, really living it up, having a fun time down there. And I always wanted to be able to just go hang out at the same time. I had met who I ended up having children with, and sorry, different segue. Him and I around, and we would talk about being old together, being gray, and having houses next door, and, you know, barbecuing and birthdays and Christmas. Like, it was so tight. And then when he decided to go to Mission Beach and like kind of cut ties in this area, which is only 10 miles away, it's not far, but it was a little like, wow, what happened?
Yeah. And so can you talk a little bit about the difference in culture of Mission Beach culture versus culture of Del Mar and where they're?
Yeah, it's a real college town, that whole PB Mission Beach area. It's a hotbed for volleyball too, but it's a real young town, pubs and bars and restaurants and people on cruiser bikes and rollerblades or roller skates. And it's, you know, it's a real youthful place. Del Mar's older homeowners there. It's mostly all renters, or a majority coming in, coming out, heavily touristed, alive all the time, similar to what maybe Newport Beach is like. Just it's going, it never stops. There's sirens, there's ambulances, there's parties in every backyard, everywhere you go. And it's like kind of chaotic, you know, a real college town. So many kids come here from wherever to go to UCSD or San Diego State, and they'll live in that area for a few years. And then they're like, okay, I've had enough. It's time to go move somewhere else and be a little more quiet. So it's an active place.
All right. So when was the last time you saw Demo?
Well, it was during that period. He had come up into Del Mar, and it was just sort of brief and short. And we didn't get a hangout for time. It was just him at the, for a day or a minute, but lots of people, and different than just us hanging out, going to dinners like we regular did, breakfast, doing our stuff we did, or hanging out at his house. And I mean, he had, you know, he brought me to so many things. I think, I don't know the year, but the Super Bowl was in San Diego, and he had, I think, his brothers and a bunch of friends from home at the house, and we were going, and that's what really blew me away. The sort of like the way our friendship was. I was so outside of football. Well, all of a sudden here I am going with him to these NFL, you know, VIP parties. It's like Terrell Davis is the superstar, and you're looking at these giant, handsome men all glossed up and beautiful flowing silk shirts and whatever watches, and like, whoa, look at this world. And they all knew him and he knew them. And it was like this massive brotherhood and fraternity. And here I am, the skinny white guy surfer. And they're like, what the hell? I don't know. It was just a radical experience.
Those people that you met were Jerry Jordan and Jeff Jordan. And I think uncles probably was there too.
Yeah.
And Jeff and Demo, they and Jason, Jason Thomas and Queenie Bradford. The unique thing about their family is they were 4 cousins, all born in the same year. The 3 males were athletes together on the field. So they were like brothers. I mean, truly like brothers. And Jerry Jordan, even though he was only 6 years older, is as close to a father figure in my eyes, the way I see it, even though they're 6 years apart. He would say more like an uncle. But Demetrius looked to Jerry, when he needed to know what to do or when he was feeling a certain way about something. And so, yeah, I mean, you see them, and they're not going to tell you like we're just cousins. Their family structure is as unique and beautiful as anyone I've ever seen. I mean, they come together as a group, and I can tell you right now, I'm like in love with that family.
Yeah, I was great. I got to hang out with them for a few days while they were here. Not only to go downtown to some clubs and whatever, but just be around them and barbecue and hang out and laugh with each other, and just to have them go, wow, Jeff is this really great close friend of Demetrius. This is bitchin'. We're loving this area. Demo, what are you, some surfer kid now? They'd always give him stick and everything. And, I wanted to back up again, talking about that NFL fraternity. At one point at the studio, the phone rang and I pick it up and it was Rudy Rudiger calling from, and I'm like, this is Rudy Rudiger calling my little old studio to check up on Demo. How did this number get to you? And he said, through maybe John Lynch or somebody. I'm like, this is wild. And so people were reaching out to him from all over, no doubt, at that moment after he'd been cut. But
yeah. And I know Rudy, I mean, helped, like Demo do his laundry at Rudy's condo, and I know they were close. I don't know what ended up happening, and I don't know if you remember. Do you remember the conversation or like what how he described their relationship?
He didn't. Demo wasn't there, and I just said, "Of course, I'm going to deliver the message," and so I did, and
got you.
Left it in his court. Like.
Right. Okay, cool. So let's go back to the last time you remember seeing him. What, even though it was brief and you didn't have a very intense talk, do you remember what he looked like, how he was behaving? Like, can you describe Demo in that last time you saw him, and how long was it before his death?
Oh, I would say probably 6 months before his death.
Okay.
And for me, it wasn't anything different. Energetically, there was something darker than I'd ever experienced. And I'm just talking this gut sense that I never got to talk with him about. But that was it. It was an energetic exchange, not he looks depressed, he looks, gaunt or any crazy weird stuff. I just sensed like he had a distanced energy from everything and everyone, as opposed to I'm fully in with everyone and all this right now. He had pulled back, and I was confused. I'm like, wow, what's going on? Why?
I knew what went on. Okay. And anyone that had to endure what he had to endure in that moment of his life, you'd feel the same thing from. So imagine a person losing everything. And I mean everything, every penny, and then not having anywhere to go suddenly.
Yeah.
He was in that spot. He was trying to figure out how to survive. And how in the hell does he end up in that spot? A person with his generosity, a person that gave away his last money, that bought all of the gifts for his little cousins every Christmas, no matter what. And then suddenly it's like a St. Francis situation where he has the clothes on his back and the clothes in his place, but he has to sell his place in order to survive.
Yeah.
So, people are wondering what was going on with him. Well, he's, taking a real hit there, and he's in Michigan. because it's an economic thing. That's where he could afford to live at that point. And, you know, eventually he sees Randy West, and Randy West, in a lot of ways, is a savior to him because he allows him to partner with him with his beach volleyball league. And Demetrius invests his last money into that league, and it's it. This is it. He's not looking back. And I think eventually, unfortunately, you didn't get to see him at the very end of his life, because at that point, the very end, I think there was an acceptance. And one of his favorite sayings from a lot of people, it is what it is. So he had and he was turning the corner. You know, that's the description that the people that were with him on his last moments tell me.
That's
and I
amazing.
have no reason to say anything but that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know if we've talked about some of like the depositions that some people gave about Demo in the Del Mar area, but they certainly didn't do him any favors. And that's being kind, and being real with it, 100% with it, is they tarnished his name to the point where it was forgotten. And when you Google it, you see this drug addicted monster who's a dangerous person who's attacking the police.
Who I never saw or knew, and spent a lot of time daily, nightly, morningly. Like I had said in the beginning of the interview, all he did was train, keep clean. You know, obviously he'll have a barbecue and have some beers, or smoke some weed at the time, but it was like that.
I got you. So let's go to that date, July 24th, 1999. Can you tell me like where you were when you heard the news, and just kind of just go from there?
Yeah. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I was on 12th Street. I had a studio with my my young wife and a brand new baby who was born in March. I hadn't been able to see Demo in any of that time. And my sister, Heather, who also was a cheerleader at Torrey Pines when John Lynch was playing, small world, walked up and said, "Jeff, did you hear Demetrius was shot and killed by the police last night?" And that's how it found me. This is pre-social media. It was just word, mouth to mouth. I don't know, or I forget where my sister heard it from. That's how I was delivered it. It was probably 11 in the morning. I'd just come back from a beach run or surfing or something and having the greatest day. And bam, I just walked in and held my daughter, because in that moment, I remembered those conversations that we'd had about growing old together, sharing lives. He never got to meet my first daughter. And it rattled me, because then I reflected, what did I not do? What could I have done more? Why, when I'd reach out, or how could I have reached out to him better? How could I find him? I didn't even have an address. I didn't know anything. And it was just a real heartbreak right then.
And so how did you interpret these events? So what was your initial instinct as to what happened and why it happened?
I'd been hearing things coming in from the outside that I was really like just absorbing and digesting, not regurgitating. A lot of them had gotten dark. And again, since I didn't get to be with him and see him, other than the one time when I said he seemed a bit reserved, pulled away. And I hate to let people tell me this is what's going on, because I didn't get to see it for myself. But it percolates around in a community when it's someone who's so loved, because everyone now there was a worried feeling leading up to that. And although you did express he'd reached this point where it was turning the corner, he'd figured it out, he'd gone through the lowest of lows after getting cut from the Jets, lost everything, found his feet again, coaching, working with kids, doing all these amazing things, volleyball on the beach every day. And so I was just confused. And at first I wanted to say, should I have expected this? But then I'm like, no, this is not righteous. This is totally it's totally wrong. Demetrius was not any of those things people might have been saying. He might have been in a low point, but no, it's tragic, it's disgusting, and it wasn't right.
Yeah. Well, where does Demetrius' story fit in today's world?
Sorry.
Where does Demetrius's story fit in today's world?
Well, with everything going on, I mean, with the reports that continue to flood the nation with these kinds of brutal acts that happen today, yesterday, or I don't, a month ago, 2 weeks ago, we might wake up tonight and there's another story. I don't know. It fits into this tragic legacy of what does it take for human change, for compassionate change with people across the country, people who might have their struggles with police forces. And it plays a huge part in this story that's just continually never seeming to change, but unfolding and changing at the same time. There's always progress happening, but then again, another tragedy happens and another. And so it feels like the rug just continues to be pulled out under. And, it was really hard for me to read into the depositions and digest it all and feel it was totally inaccurate, how it happened, not inaccurate, but the worst thing possible I watched you reenact the scene down there in Mission Beach, how it all played out. How? And that might be happening and it is happening in a lot of these current situations over the last few years. So the story fits into that line of question the authority, question the rules, question the lawmakers, question who's running the training programs, question.
Yeah. Jeff, I want you to look at me and just just talk to Demo. I want you to get this chance to say one last thing to him.
Hey, Demo, you know that you were supposed to be right here with me, hanging out just like every other day, living our life in the sunshine, going through our highs and lows together. You with your love of your life on your arm, with your kids on your lap, or now they'd be playing sports, you'd be coaching them. We'd all be hanging out at the same beaches, barbecuing. We'd be just having a good time, man. And we wouldn't talk for 2 weeks and 3 weeks because life happens with parents, but I know you'd have been an amazing father. And I just, so sad that you didn't get that chance, and you deserve that chance, my friend.
It's beautiful, Jeff. Let me ask you to do one other thing. And it's your chance to say anything that comes from your heart. Anything. It could be about anything. But I want you just to speak from your heart right now.
Oh, man. I thought I just did.
Oh, you definitely.
Well, I want to reach out to all Demetrius's cousins that might be listening, might not. I've listened to theirs, to his mom, to all his past coaches, all his past great friends, everyone that's helped him across that journey that was the legacy of Demetrius's DuBose life up until it was tragically taken, and just say every one of you played a huge role in why that smile was what it was, why his vitality, why his fight and his passion and his charm and his understanding was what made him that magic, beautiful man that he was, is because every one of you out there that touched him, he took that a piece. He always took a piece in the best way and turned that into him.
It's beautiful, Jeff. Jeff, thanks so much. I really appreciate you being here, and I look forward to seeing you at the vigil that we're hosting on Mission Boulevard in front of Sam's Little Market. It'll be in the street. We'll march, and it'll be 13 minutes, one for every bullet. And we're going to do that on July 24th, 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And I can't wait to give you a big hug at that event. And then obviously I'll see you the next day at Devin's celebration of life as well. And I look forward to just being with you, my man.
All right, John. Thank you so much. Everybody out there, keep up the love. Demetrius loves you from above right now.
That's right. Much love, Jeff.
Right. Bye. Have a great day.
You too.